Hello and welcome to Together the Podcast, a God TV production. I'm so excited to invite you into today's conversation where we're going to discuss some difficult subjects with my very special guest. It's a bit of a different show today, guys. Very interesting. I've got with me baby Levi, who I'm sure he's going to upstage all of us at some point. He's currently smiling at his mother. If you are not watching, and chewing his daddy's finger. And I've got Noah and Lucy. Noah, I mean, you're the producer on this show, so...
It's weird being this side of the table.
But welcome both to the show. I'm really excited and nervous to have you here because I know what we're going to talk about today. But do you want to tell everyone at home like what you're here to talk about today?
You go for it.
Sure. Yeah, we're here to talk about miscarriage and I guess general kind of like relationships in the church. About a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
A year and a half ago, we experienced miscarriage. So yeah, that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, well, thanks. I think it's really brave of you to rock up and talk about it. I think before we get into, the heavy discussion and, kind of what you felt and what you went through and how the church did or didn't deal with it and, what sort of God has taught you and then clearly blessed you with. Like you've got like an interesting story, like that is probably unique from a cultural perspective these days. But it requires you to share something that I wouldn't normally ask a guest. But how old are you both?
24.
25.
So quite still young.
Thank you.
I'm 38 and I've no babies just yet. God willing, I'll have one day. But more interestingly, you met when you were...
We met when we were 12 and 13, and
right.
then we have been together since we were 14 and 15.
So you've been you're been together 10 years and you're 25.
Yeah,
that's
I
insane.
tied him down. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, did that song come out? Should have put a ring on it. I mean that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about what it was like. Like, have you always been Christians, or were you Christian families? And maybe Lucy, we'll start with you. How did you know God, and was God part of your life when you met Noah? And
Yeah, sure. We both are from Christian families. I think. Well, we actually met at a Christian festival, so we're that classic Christian couple. It's a bit icky, and we won't go into the detail of it because I don't come off very well in that story.
She stalked me.
No, we now have to. We absolutely now have to know exactly what happened.
Come on, I'm like 12. And
Right.
It's like at a skate park, and I thought Noah was quite attractive, so pursued that, and I kind of got shot down in the end. But it worked out all right for me.
Hey,
So
look where it ended.
it's fine now.
I mean, I think it worked all right for Noah as well. I'll be honest.
Yeah, I had to tie her down.
Right.
That's the reality of this.
But yeah, I think like church life was all I'd ever known really. And so I think to meet somebody who kind of was in that same sphere of the world was really cool. And I think particularly when you're teenagers, it's interesting trying to do Christianity, which is so polar opposite to kind of school and what your mates are up to and all of that, that to find somebody that kind of aligned with that was really cool. Didn't come without its challenges in that though. I think we all know as Christians you have to make a choice, right, as to whether you kind of follow a certain path or what you choose to kind of go with and what you put your foot down and what convicts you, I guess. And we had to kind of figure that out along the way, and things looked different compared to when you're 14 to when you're 18 to when did we get married?
2019. Just before.
So like 20, like we went through uni together and all of that looked really different.
I think
you go to the same uni?
Yeah.
Eventually. I think this is what's really cool is that looking back at like kind of our journey, we've grown up together.
Right.
As in we didn't live near each other. We were North Devon, South Cornwall. seemingly quite far away from each other, but what's been really nice being together since we were like that age, like we've gone through those huge milestones that you do as you grow up through those teenage years, as you navigate kind of all those tricky things and how to, you know, be an adult in this world through to 18 through to college, uni, all of that. What's been really nice is that we've kind of gone through that together, grown up together, and we're completely different people than when we met, thankfully, at 14.
It'd be really weird if you weren't. But you know, you said that it's quite a typical Christian thing, but I still think that's probably really rare in the Christian circles. To meet the person you're going to marry and have a family with.
I guess it's what you hear your parents did, right? But it's not really so
It's not what my parents did. So, Lucy, when did you sort of give your life to Christ? Like, what's your testimony? Because, you know, like a lot of people can just be like, oh, well, my family Christian, so I am. But there's still a decision point. Like, when did that happen for you?
I think I was about my first kind of point of really having like encountered Jesus in a different way. I think I was about 8. We'd gone along to this like event thing near us, and it was like those youth events, and I kind of just came along as the younger sibling, and that for me was kind of that first point. Kind of didn't really do much with that, I guess, as an 8-year-old, and then it probably wasn't until I was about 11, 12 maybe that things felt different, and it was a choice, and probably stepping into that secondary school thing was I have to make a choice here. It's one of those things that I think no matter what I've kind of been through, and I've struggled a lot mental health wise and things like that, it's that I can't deny what Jesus has done, and like I know.
Oh dear.
I can't deny that difference that God has in my life, even amongst difficult things and joyful things too, but there's just something different about life with God in it.
Yeah. What about you, Noah? When did you meet God? When? Decision.
I've grown up a PK, pastor's kid, pretty much for as long as I can remember. So I kind of always grew up in the church, and I guess, I had to, there was that kind of defining moment where I kind of had to make this my own thing. I'd always grown up hearing about God and seeing it in my home from the front in church. But there came a point where like I just needed to make a decision as to whether this was for me or not. And actually, to be honest, my first initial decision was that it wasn't for me.
Right.
And I remember sitting down and telling my parents in our conservatory, Mum, Dad.
I can imagine you doing that. Knowing you, for everyone at home, Noah would be really kind and considered about it. You'd have put some language around it.
Slideshow, PowerPoint.
Yeah. Mum, Dad. So how old were you when you said that?
12 maybe,
right.
13. But my initial kind of like decision was that like this wasn't for me. I didn't like going to church on a Sunday necessarily, and it just wasn't really personal for me. And it wasn't for a few years actually, when I was at a Christian festival, and I just saw God move in an incredible way, unexplainable. And I just had to finally ask myself that question, like, I can't explain this.
Do you remember what it was?
I saw people getting healed, and God moved kind of like in the room, and people that I knew were doing things that they would never have done. And sorry.
No, I apologise.
And I couldn't deny that there was something here, and I had to make that decision as to what that was. And just realised in that moment that God was real, and if he's real, then everything my parents had brought me up to believe and taught me was real as well, and therefore God is an incredible, it was just this most like mind-blowing thing to me.
Wow. I mean, I think that's quite key in a lot of stories that I've heard, is that there's a point where you're in or you're out. When God does something amazing in front of you, it's either this massive coincidence or God is real. It's really nice to hear that you can be out and then in, like that God would specifically seek you down, Noah, and do something that changed your mind when It was so serious for you that you weren't going to have God in your life that you told your parents. And I think about the things I've sat down and told my parents in life, which are very few, and then you understand how serious that is. You know, so well, thank God for that. So you're here today. Talk to me about a little bit about, you know, some of the challenges of growing up as a Christian couple in like university and.
Go on, you go.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like I said, like we had already kind of grown up together, so it was actually really nice for a lot of people, uni is that like you're leaving everything like you're comfortable with and you know, and moving into like this weird environment. And so actually I was at uni for a year before Luce joined, but it was really nice kind of going through that experience together, and that same journey we had gone through, I guess, as like kids, we were still going on as students. But like as a couple, I think it was really, really interesting. I think we were both, both got plugged into church like really quickly. And so we were really involved in church, but we still kind of like.
Where did you go to uni?
Plymouth.
And what church did you get plugged into?
So St. Matt's.
Okay, shout out St. Matt's.
Shout out St. Matt's, which is where we both actually work now. But kind of being part of uni, the other element of that is student life, and we loved kind of like uni. We lived with non-Christians. I lived with non-Christians, you lived with them later on, but then we would go out and kind of do all that thing as well. So there were definitely, I think it did start to introduce those kind of pressures, I guess, outside.
What were the kind of pressures that you faced?
Like intimacy. We had never, up until that point, we would visit each other at our parents' houses. So like this was the first.
Sorry, I'm just thinking.
So
what made you laugh? What came to mind? It seems like
remember the first time Noah came to mind. We were like 14, 15. And I remember Noah's mum ringing and speaking to my dad, and like I think Dad was like, "Oh, is there anything that you can't have or whatever?" And your mum just being like, "You don't really like mushrooms." I just remember it. I don't know. Sorry. It's really insignificant.
But although this wasn't like the first time that we'd like had to struggle with this topic or of intimacy and kind of all of that in our relationship, this is the first time where we were in complete control, I guess, over this. Like,
so what were you taught as kids about intimacy and relationship?
I guess like growing up in the church, and actually this is a huge part of our story.
Yeah.
That like growing up in the church, like sex was bad, it was naughty, stay away from it, just stay away from it. And so although we still struggled with the ideas, the temptations before moving to uni, I guess moving to uni, it was the first time that we had been in a situation where we had complete control over everything, right? We both had a flat, a room, somewhere we could be where it was just us two. And we had to navigate that, albeit not very well sometimes, but we had to navigate that. But I think what was really nice is that we had that for a lot of couples. I think university is the thing that makes or breaks them. They've moved to different cities, whatever that looks like, and that's the thing that takes them apart. And actually, it was our university years that brought us closer together, and we ended up getting married whilst we're at uni.
Oh wow!
Which was like a adventure in itself, trying to write dissertations and plan weddings. And
yeah, I didn't do very well that year. But I also think like couples make or break in that uni bit, but also Christians, I think sometimes like you hear of a lot of Christians that go to uni and then that's it for them.
Right, they come away from faith,
and it's like they kind of lean into a different way of doing life than they've ever known. And I think for us, being plugged into church really, really helped that, because although we had these choices to make and didn't always make the right one, we also had accountability on the other side, and we had friends that were plugged into church as well, and we would still be at church every Sunday, and you were serving and I was serving on youth and things like that. So I think that did help balance that a little bit, whereas perhaps I see how people do struggle without a good church community around them when they go to uni. It's really hard.
So did you, around the question of, intimacy, and I guess the other challenges that come in, which are, like other people as well getting involved in your relationship. Did you ever like have specific conversations about that, or was it just, we believe this thing, so we're going to aim for it, and the thing being purity, you know?
We had to keep coming back and talking about it, didn't we?
Yeah.
In terms of, is there a line? Where's the line? Or we've blurred the line, we need to come back. And I think it was a constant conversation. And actually it's one that, like you kind of alluded to, played into when we got married. We really struggled with intimacy, actually, because for so long it had been this thing that we were like, no, we cannot cross this harsh line. And if we did, we'd done something wrong, and we were really like guilty about it and things like that. So the minute we got married and it was then okay to, we had all of this, but for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever, we've had this conversation a million times that we're not allowed to do these things. Now we can, and we're like, I can't undo all of that in my head. So that caused some problems, but I think like, I think our non-Christian friends just kind of never really asked. They weren't really that bothered. Which I guess was helpful. I think they just presume things, and you just kind of don't really
talk about it. What do you think God was saying to you in those conversations?
I think the thing that we really struggled with is that, like, the church, and I say the church, broad capital C, like...
Yeah, capital C.
We, in that conversation, especially with young people, we found, and I guess our experience and part of our story is that, like, God's grace isn't taught in the same topic.
Sure.
So for people that have... that are struggling, that have crossed the line, have whatever their scenario looks like, it's really easy to feel condemned, and I guess that's kind of like the right word. That for us in those conversations, it was just guilt. Right. Every time that we were like, we've gone too far, or whatever that looks like. And so that going back to like actually our first year of marriage, like intimacy and sex was such a difficult thing for us to navigate, because overnight this thing where it was wrong, stay away from it, blah blah blah, overnight was you should be doing it, you should be good at it, you should,
like the opposite pressure.
Total opposite. And I guess our experience, and we both grew up in good churches, great youth groups, but still I guess the average experience is like there's one or the other. It's very black and white. There's no... Our marriage course was the first time that we had sat down with married couples and spoken about intimacy, and that was 10 weeks before we got married, right? And then all of a sudden we've then got this thing to figure out. And so we hugely struggled with that, actually, entering marriage, that we didn't know how to be intimate with each other. We had spent years and years dancing around this thing and trying to figure out what this looked like. And then when it was right and we could and it mattered, we really struggled. And it defined maybe the first year and a half of our marriage. We had to go through therapy, physical and like mental therapy. And to kind of undo all these years of work that's caused our minds to struggle with this thing.
Is there like a breakthrough phrase or a moment that you could talk about that you think would help people at home? Because I have a similar story in that I wasn't a Christian, so that wasn't important to me. Safety in intimacy, around is the world's message. It's be intimate but be safe about it, right? So when I became a Christian at the age of 31 or something like that, 30 maybe, I can't remember exactly, but I was already in a relationship. We'd already crossed those lines, and then I took a vow of celibacy, and what that created was the same issues. In that my partner didn't understand why I would do that. Did I not love her anymore? Didn't understand the whole Christianity around that. And I was like, can I really ever have my purity back? If I repent for it, do I have I messed it up? Can I sort of be clean? I don't think it was necessarily a narrative from the church, but it's certainly like how I felt.
Yeah.
And that's what I hear you both saying is, well, I've just felt guilty, and it wasn't that the church said I should be,
yeah.
but there needed to be a heavier dose of grace.
Yeah.
And then when I did get married, then it was hard to like press go on it again, because I was like, I don't have the desire anymore. There is a bit of guilt, and there's nothing like trying to be intimate and thinking I shouldn't be doing this at the same time. It's
doesn't really help, does it?
So is there anything that you could say that will encourage the listeners that are struggling with either don't be intimate or do be intimate, because they're two sides of the same sword? What is like the breakthrough moments for you that you've clearly managed to be intimate, because there's a little baby down there that tells me. So yeah, but like what sort of helped in your relationship?
This is actually really we have this quite a lot. Speaking to other people, that actually once we opened up about this thing, we realised that it was such a common thing, and that so many people around us had gone through the same or similar thing.
I just really don't like really talking about it. I can feel myself talking about it and thinking, oh, the world's going to see this. What are they going to think of me? Should I be talking about it? But it is my experience is the same as yours.
The saddest thing is that we saw our therapist. She was a psychosexual therapist, and in our first consultation, she was asking all these questions, and the second that we said that we were Christians, she goes,
right,
there we are. A lot of my clients are Christians.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what that highlights to me, I guess, is that somewhere, and this is a really tricky thing, we've spoken to so many people since, and I don't know what the answer is, because do I think that we should be like encouraging young people to be more intimate with their partners?
No.
And so like I don't know what the answer is, but all I know is that with young people, growing up in the church, and that there's a link to entering marriage and not knowing how to be intimate, which is the opposite. I mean, you read everything that God says about intimacy, and it's a God-given gift. It's something that that should be enjoyed, and we get to enjoy. And for whatever reason, kind of through the church, maybe like that. That's just an issue, I guess, for a lot of people.
So I guess what we're saying is it's normal, and lots of people struggle with it. We're just having a little baby moment.
Sorry,
so I think Levi's struggling right now. Why don't we get him out and have a cuddle with him and see if that helps?
I think as well a large part is, why are you not being intimate?
Yeah.
And why should you be? When the time comes for either, I think it's one of those things that we just don't explain to young people. Why? It's just you don't do this because you don't.
Yeah.
And it's wrong. And then you do it because you're married.
Yeah.
But why?
Yeah.
And I think a large part of like, okay, once we'd decided that we were going to get married, why not then?
Yeah.
Because if we're going to go down this path anyway, why not?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of other things that Christians are kind of encouraged not to do and to do, there is a level of conversation around it. And again, like we've talked about, it's just something people don't feel comfortable speaking about.
Yeah.
So how are we ever going to teach our young people that there is a reason that we don't choose to do that? And it is a choice.
Yeah.
And that you save it for something that makes it so much more worthwhile and special once you're married. But as with anything, you're never too far gone for what God wants to do with that. And again, we just don't give it that same, grace is the right word around it. It's just on a different level that we're like, no, once you've done it, that's it, tainted, whatever. But it's not the case.
Well, it's like God knew anyway what you were going to do right before you did it. And I think he sets out a plan for your life. Around purity, for me, I think it's very much about celebrating its value and really explaining to young people that it's normal to want to be intimate with somebody you think you love, but the reason that we don't is because it's important to do it within a covenant relationship, which we call marriage, and that God teaches loads about that, in his word and why it's important. And, there's lots of stuff out there about creating soul ties and what happens when you are intimate with somebody. And you know, like the sort of fast dating culture is just hurting. People are hurting themselves and they're hurting other people. So like, you know, I understand why God would want that model for marriage.
Yeah, definitely.
But I also see the struggles that you've had and the struggles I've had. And I'm not saying they're created by the church. I just think, you know, my understanding of it is that when I try not to do something I'm not supposed to do, and I pray for God's help with it, and he helps me, and then I fail and I ask for repentance, and there's this whole process that it's like you say, it's like, oh, then one day I've said some words and it's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't have the inner feeling and the heart change and the experience to be like, oh, I should be enjoying this now.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think, and this is a whole other topic for another podcast, but I think like reflecting back at it as well, like I learnt more about sex education in the playground and through my school than I did the church and church leaders, which like, of course, we're going to struggle, right?
Yeah. And it might just be a cultural thing, because I know in America, like with the youth, that it's a big part of their teaching, you know. The word, I think the purity message is more of an American thing, but in England, you know, I've never seen a youth
just
thing
avoid
like
it,
yeah,
right? Like,
yeah. Or deal with individuals on an individual basis, because like I'm sure when you've run youth things, like people have come to you and you've talked about it, so I know that there is good community around it. Like we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, like, you know, right, literally, but. You know, because I don't want to say the church is like all bad at this, because there are pockets of people doing this work. But in general, as a young pair of Christians and as someone that's a bit older, we've both had a similar experience. So thank you for sharing. I hope it has encouraged some people at home. Let's move on to miscarriage and your experience with that, because you know, it's a difficult subject. I feel a little bit nervous talking about it because I have no experience of it at all, and feel really caring towards you both. You know, I feel like a real softness there. So I'm just really grateful that you would just share your experience, and maybe talk a little bit about, you know, what happened, how it happened. And let's start there and see how God uses it.
Cool. Do you want me to go? Is that helpful?
I don't mind, whatever you want. I feel like it undercuts the tone a little bit.
Well, I know. And you said that before we started, that having a baby here undercuts the tone of miscarriage. But I just want to encourage you that that's the testimony of like you've had a bad experience, and yet God has come good for you, and not everyone will have that experience. And you know, the truth is, we're here to talk about family issues, and normally we'd chuck the baby out the room with someone stranger to look after them, and so he's here, you know, and he is part of this podcast, and
just have to deal with the noise.
Yeah, just have to deal with Levi sharing God's joy with us, and you know, like, I don't think it does undercut, you know, your experience, and we'll just deal with it.
Right. Go for this.
So I guess, as we've touched on, we had intimacy difficulties surrounding that. Throw in a pandemic, and we live with my parents first, and then we live with Noah's parents. And if you'd have asked me when I was a kid, what job did I want to do when I grow up, it was be a mum, 100%. Or a member of One Direction's wife, but that didn't happen, so I became a mum instead.
Thank God.
But
the popular bands are available.
And all I ever wanted to be was a mum, and I think we'd had this conversation literally when we'd met, things like that. And it was on our radar once we got married, not straight away, we were still at uni. But we knew that was kind of what we wanted for our lives, in quite close proximity to getting married. And we had all this difficulty, which obviously means that can't happen. And for a long time just felt the weight of actually we just really want to work on our intimacy for intimacy's sake rather than to have a child. And we kind of got to a better place with that, and I think we were like, cool, like things aren't 100%, but we feel more in control of this. And we found out we were pregnant November of 2021. And it was literally the best thing ever.
Yeah, as Lou said, this is something we've spoken about since we were like 14, 15.
Yeah,
it's all Luce has ever wanted to done. And we'd then been trying for over a year and going through everything we were going through. Like, this was such a huge moment for us.
Yeah. And I think we didn't really... it's a weird moment when you find out, gosh, I'm going to be responsible for a small person. And it's what I've wanted, but this is also terrifying. And we'd kind of told... we kept it to ourselves for about a week and then told my family, your family. And, we were just all over the moon.
Yeah,
right?
like a huge cause for celebration.
Yeah, like everyone. And my parents were like, we prayed for this. And everyone knew that it was kind of what we'd really wanted. So everyone was on board. And we kind of slowly started telling friends because I was sick as a dog. It wasn't very fun. And on December 23rd, so it's about a month afterwards, kind of just didn't feel like something was quite right. My birthday is Christmas Eve, so we went to Exeter for the day, just the day before. And yeah, just something was off. Didn't feel quite right, and kind of went to bed that night and was like, right, we'll see how things go. And woke up that day and I won't massively go into the detail, but just again knew something wasn't right. We managed to get a scan at the hospital, and they were, when we were there, they were like, I'm really sorry that we can't find a heartbeat. And I think, in films you see that ringing noise and it goes really dark and you just tunnel vision, right? I don't think you ever expect to hear it.
No.
And we'd known about that little baby for about a month, so it was very real to us. Not that I think timeline matters in that sense, but we'd totally we talked about, are they going to be a boy or a girl? What are we going to buy? How are we going to afford this, that and the other?
We had dreamt the whole future for that child. As in, quite literally going, imagine when they're this age and blah, blah, blah. Like, already in that month, we'd had, a lifetime of conversations.
And I think, so I should have been about 8 weeks. And there's this thing called a missed miscarriage where, unfortunately, baby doesn't make it as far as you think you are, and your body takes a little while to catch up. And so they were like, they just kind of sent us on our way, really, and it's Christmas Eve. And we were like, we were kind of a bit lost, really. And we were supposed to be at a church service that afternoon, and we were like, we're not coming. And we had planned to spend Christmas Day by ourselves as our last one before baby. And actually we're just like, we can't sit in our flat by ourselves right now. So we drove down to my parents. And I remember vividly, we kind of just sat in the car and couldn't talk. But Noah has this playlist called Worship Chilled, and we always put it on all the time. Bless you. And just every song that came on, without a doubt, for an hour and a half in the car down to my parents, every song spoke into our situation. And I know it might sound really weird, but I've never felt more peace than I did in that moment. Heartbroken, grieving, but peace beyond understanding. And
it sounds weird to be
peaceful,
peaceful,
it's really
right?
bizarre, right? But
God, right?
It just felt like God was in there with us. Wow. And we kind of went through the motions for a little bit. I had to go back into hospital a couple of days after Christmas, just to be checked up on. It's quite a brutal physical process, to be honest. And I think we were very naive to miscarriage. I don't think I had known of anyone that had miscarried. I now know that lots of people I know have, but at the time I didn't. And yeah, it's far bigger than I think I ever expected it to be. And yeah, we just had to get some physical support with that, and there wasn't a lot of emotional support around that, unfortunately, in that moment. Like Noah said earlier, we both work for church, so we took some time off. People checked in on us, but it was I think I took about 6 weeks off of work, because I was just in a really weird place of how do you teach young people as a youth pastor that God loves them when you're feeling like, oh, God's totally abandoned me. And I'm not very good at, I don't have a very good poker face, so I don't think I would have done a very good job of that. So yeah, I took a little stint off and just kind of worked through how to get through every day, really, and had to really find I think it took me back to a place in my faith that was like starting at basics again. And as somebody who had grown up in church, that was a weird place to find myself in, I think, of like the God I thought I knew, not really sure who that is anymore, and I've got to refigure it out. You would say you struggled in a different way, being the guy.
What was it like for you, Noah?
I think it was really tricky. I mean, like Lou said, when she was pregnant, she was sick as a dog and was very much going through the motions of being pregnant. The really cruel thing is that doesn't stop when you start going through miscarriage. So she was still throwing up for about 3 or 4 weeks after having miscarried, which was such a cruel reminder of what was going on, because
your body's still thinking.
Yeah.
Is going through all the hormones still. And so I think it was a really, I think for both of us, it was like, I can speak for myself, like we just felt numb in that moment. I think, like Lou said, there was a weird like divine peace about that, which was really cool. But like beyond that, like nothing feels real. And it was about a month of just everything just almost stopping. Everything just felt really weird. And I think I had to really process like what was going on and these emotions. And we actually really struggled to start off with, notwithstanding the initial shock of it, where we were both distraught and sat in the car crying for 2 hours before leaving the car from the hospital, you know. After that, like we both had to process this, and we processed it very differently. It wasn't until eventually we found a charity which provides counselling support for people that have gone through miscarriage or child loss. And they're an absolute godsend to us. We found out about them through a friend of ours, but apparently they also should be recommending this at hospital appointments when you're going through this. But with this therapist, we were able to basically sit down and process it. And it took a while for us to do this. We were having counselling for about 6 months afterwards.
Yeah.
Maybe. To go through, I mean, we're grieving. Luce is physically going through something, and I'm trying to figure out how to grieve, how to support Luce going through this physical thing. But also, I couldn't take 6 weeks off work, so I went back to work earlier than Luce did, and then had to deal with that and navigate that as well. And so it was really interesting. I think we both went through, although it was the same scenario, we both went through really different journeys, and I think we found each other along the way there as well through therapy.
What do you think like the sort of church says about this? Because you said you had to find sort of God again, and you've found this charity. I don't know if it was a Christian charity or not, but
they're not, but a lot of them are.
Yeah, is what's like the theology on that? How do you find God again?
We I think again this was a topic that again, it's not talked about in church. I really think as a church, leaders of churches need to be better at talking about these really real, really raw topics, be that sex education, be that miscarriage, grief, loss, whatever that looks like. Because our vicar at the time was incredible. He was great, very much sat down and said, hey, this is rubbish, in not so many letters. I can't imagine what you're going through. And just helped us really process that. I think naturally the Christian response is, it's okay, God's got a plan, or God loves you, or God knew this was going to happen, or I'm praying for you, or all these like really well-meaning, really true statements, but like in that moment, like is just not your reality. We're having to deal with and process like who is God if God is love? When we're not feeling any love right now, when our hearts have been torn out and we need to process this thing, like how can God be in this moment? And we had to learn how he was, and he was. But the response from most Christians is really well-meaning, but like just not helpful in that moment. Right. And I think because this isn't spoken about, we found actually we had the opposite of people that actually maybe even to this day have said nothing because they don't know how to talk about it. Have never acknowledged it, never spoken about it.
So what do you think people should do? I mean, this is a great place for people to hear like what is helpful in that moment.
I think I would definitely say it depends how well you know the person, and we're okay talking about it, but some people might not be, and that's okay. And I think it's really important to remember miscarriage, loss, whatever, is very individual, and therefore needs an individual response, right? But I think I was just like, I talked about it quite publicly, and I think to then have people saying, oh, I didn't know if you felt comfortable talking about it, felt a bit like a kick in the teeth when you're actually saying, oh, I will talk about it. But my biggest thing was nobody asked. I think just ask. Do you want to talk about it? Do you not want to talk about it? Most people, I would say, are probably okay with being asked that question and choosing whether they would like to open up or not. But to be invited into that feels different than not having it acknowledged at all, because not having that on the table at all is like, feels a bit disregarding of how you feel, right? And it's a sad thing, and sometimes people don't want to be lumped with that themselves, and that's fine. But I think just an acknowledgement is something, right? Like, actually, that sucks, I'm really sorry. It doesn't take a lot to say that to that someone, and I think it's one of those areas that if somebody passes away, we don't always worry what we're supposed to say to the grieving person, right? But in topics like miscarriage and child loss, because it is different, we do just struggle with that as a society, I think, not just as church and Christians. Just in general, it is starting to become a bit more talked about. And I think, again, talking about it openly, whilst our vicar was incredible, as a whole, churches talking about it openly and not just in the intimate helps those conversations of actually, how do we be there for people? How do we be Jesus in that situation? The more we can talk about it, the more we can be open as a society, as church, as Christians, the easier it is to answer that in the how can I be Jesus in this situation? And we should think like that for all situations, right? Like, not just around this, but I think if we're always asking, hey, what would Jesus do in this? Do you know what I mean?
I think the people that really impacted us were people that met us where we're at. So like I said, the people that were like, it'll be okay, it'll be better, it'll be hard for a little bit, and then like we weren't there. So it was really hard for us to find comfort from that, or for them to relate to us, I guess, in that moment. The people that really impacted us were, you had an amazing friend who just came round and sat down and said nothing. But 2 hours or whatever, just sat with Luce. while Luce was processing all of this, while she was mourning, grieving, going through all of this, and this friend didn't need to say anything, but just her presence being there was incredibly special.
Yeah.
And I think we have so many incredible friends, but yeah, it was those people that weren't trying to fix it.
Right.
We didn't need to know that everything would be okay. We knew at the back of our minds that this wasn't, this would be okay. That'd be an okay ending to this. So it was really the people that like weren't trying to fix our problems, weren't trying to give solutions, but actually were just there with us. Like those are the people we remember having impacted that moment, having supported us in that moment. And so I'd encourage, I guess, like people, if you know somebody that's going through it, and I reckon you do actually.
Well, this is a strange thing. Do you know, because you were posting about it on Facebook and being really open about it. And I'd never probably thought about it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then, I spoke to members of my family and then found out that they too had experienced this. I'm talking like really close members of my family.
Yeah.
And just had no idea. And so people deal with it privately, I think. I think it's way more common than I'd realised.
Yeah.
But also, if as Christians, we're pro-life, whatever that political statement means to you, but that if, God creates us in his image and, knits us together in the womb, and then that life is sacred, then there must be a grieving process because, like a person has died. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter whether it's been a week or 10 weeks or 7 months or whatever. I can imagine it. It's just harrowing, whatever, because you have started to create a future, and you have lost a life.
Yeah, definitely.
And I never see that talked about ever. I've never seen a preach about.
Yeah. And do you know what the interesting thing is that with everything, I guess, that we've spoken about, but particularly this topic, the second we were open about it, the second we were public about what we were going through, and shared our experiences, like we're vulnerable in that, how we've found it hard, we found that we knew so many people, a sad amount of people that had gone through it, were going through it, or knew others that were going through it, that had no support, didn't talk about it because they didn't think it was anything else that anybody was going through, and struggled with that kind of in silence.
Because you kind of told it's common,
Yeah, so I think the statistic is it's 1 in 4 pregnancies.
Right.
So not even 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4 pregnancies it happens to. And that, like, it's a thing that happens, sadly. Like, the world is a broken place. Sin, this is just something that happens. But it breaks my heart that potentially 1 in 4 people are going through this alone or don't feel like they can talk to people about it. And so, 100%. I think we as Christians need to do more, even just to be more aware. And I think that's all that happened. The more that we've just become more aware of this thing that people go through.
Oh yeah. It was totally not on my radar until we went through it, and now I have a different. It's funny, isn't it, how God uses those things, in that I have a totally different pair of eyes now for that. And we had Mother's Day 3 months after I'd miscarried, and actually to be in a staff meeting and be that voice for people, like for mums that had lost children, or for women that might be sat there and not visibly be a mum. It was just different, and the year before I never would have thought about it. And
you'd probably been super positive about celebrating mothers,
and you go, I know people have miscarried, but I think it's different when to be part of that group, maybe. But I think it came to a point, and it was, okay, I've gone through this thing, can't change that, what's God going to do with it? And I think that was the mindset shift, rather than figuring out why it had happened, because you'll never get to the bottom of that. People give well-meaning this, that and the other, and I could go on a long journey to question that, but I'll never know. But what I do know is who God is, and that he's not forgotten people in that. And even if your story of miscarriage hasn't or won't get to the point where you can hold your baby and talk about that time, I think it's knowing who God is and what he wants to do with that.
Yeah.
And it might not be on a public platform, and it might not be talking to other people, but God doesn't, forget those difficulties, whatever they are in our lives, and leave them where they are.
Yeah.
He can do lots with our brokenness and our broken hearts and things like that. So I think it's just being open to that. And I think for us, it just looked like, okay, where can we be those voices for people that may not feel like they can talk? Or
and like I said, we just started speaking about it. We just felt like this at the time. Loose had like a very public platform, and we just felt like, okay, if we're going through this, we know other people are going through it. Let's try and make that a little bit less painful, a little bit less lonely for other people that are going through similar things. And we found like such incredible stories and situations that people were going through, that like they saw what we were going through and it brought them comfort. And they found God in that. Or non-Christians that were going through it, they're like, how do you find that comfort? Sure. Like what is this thing that gave you peace in this? And which is a really kind of like interesting, exciting, but obviously we're still going through this grieving process. And we were for a while, and I actually found, I think now moving on to like, obviously we've got Levi here. It made that experience of getting pregnant again, it so hard.
Right.
Like so hard.
Yeah.
Like there was no, obviously we're excited, but there was no kind of like every bit of joy was met with anxiety and fear.
Because now you're like, we're pregnant again.
Yeah.
I want to celebrate with my family, but I'm going to put the reins on.
Yeah.
You've got that then through the whole pregnancy, I guess.
Yeah, I think at the start, in that kind of 12-week bit that, you're not really supposed to tell anyone in case the worst happens, I think it was that we still told those people that were closest to us. And actually we had this, I'm going to tell the people that I want whatever happens, right? And we had that mentality then of, we know from experience that pregnancy test doesn't necessarily mean baby, right? As in like, having a baby. And I think that first 12 weeks was really tough, and they kind of, you get all the statistics about a miscarriage is much higher in those first 12 weeks and stuff. So that was pretty rough. And I was still sick as a dog, and a few lovely people told me that, sickness is a good sign, right? Well, it wasn't last time. So.
Wives' tales are the worst thing. The worst thing.
So let's not, go with that. But I don't think we properly chilled out until about 20 weeks.
Even then, I don't think I did.
And even then, I think until we literally had him in our arms, I don't think we really chilled out. And lots of people will be like that. Pregnancy brings a lot of anxiety anyway. But I think having experienced loss, you know it's possible, and it's not that person I heard on TV. It's very raw and it's very real, and it's very close to home.
Yeah. And I think, like we said earlier, like it doesn't matter when in the process, it may happen, miscarriage, like it's still painful. Like it's true, and like it was really painful at like 1 month. But I think the more you go, the more physical the process is. Sure. And I think there's for us, even though we're like, okay, this is further into the clear, at the same time we were like, this is further into like painful territory. Where so it was a really interesting thing to try and like hold that tension of like being excited and wanting to like we wanted to be able to get excited about going out and buying baby clothes.
Right.
We didn't do that.
Right.
Really. It wasn't until so he was born in December. It was probably like end of November, December that we allowed ourselves to go, okay, let's maybe buy him a cot now.
Yeah.
And he needs a pram, so let's maybe go and do that now. Everything before, we were terrified of going out, buying all this equipment, doing up a nursery room, and then there not being a baby to fill that room and those clothes.
Yeah. Which
was such a weird, like scary thing to try and navigate.
I think what strikes me, if I sort of try and summarise a little bit what you said, is we all need to have a little bit more compassion with couples that are pregnant, because while we feel like it should be a time to celebrate, if I don't know you, Lucy, I just see you're pregnant, and I don't understand why she's acting a bit weird. Why are they not buying baby clothes? Why are they not, super confident in this? And both as two people that, now I've known you for a while, and Lucy, I'd say we're new friends, but, you seem pretty well put together,
Thanks.
and actually to hear, well, you have had counselling, you have had counselling for then when you lost the baby as well, and that you don't have to be completely hopeless to get help, you go and seek that help. But the thing that really encourages me as an evangelist really is what you're saying about God is almost not that God would create that, but God will use any opportunity and make it and use it for his glory and his goodness. And even when you couldn't see that, you've kind of come out with a stronger relationship with God, because you're like, well, yeah, I do now have this heart for advocacy for people that have suffered miscarriage. I do pray differently on Mother's Day now. I'm like ever more thankful for Levi that I'm holding now. It, almost like without that experience, it's brought a lot more pain and a lot more anxiety, but it's also brought a lot more love, joy, gratefulness, compassion for those that are hurting. That when God does that for us, we do understand he is good, that it's okay to go, well, why? I'm going to have to check again. I know he says he's good. I know that in my deep heart of heart. And yet it's okay to not feel like that, and to know that you've had to wrestle that. I just want to encourage people at home, really, that if they're feeling like God isn't there for them, that God's given up on them, that they've had all these bad things happen to them, whether they be miscarriage or something else, that we know that God hasn't created those situations, and we want to remind people that he will use them for his glory, and that their testimony might not look like a Levi, but it will look like God's glory in their life, and that's really what's encouraged me today is, well, it doesn't matter what I'm suffering, it's going to give me something else. That pain will give me something good. I think we're probably at a good time to wrap up. I don't think we could carry on talking about it forever, I think, and there's lots of other things that have come up, but just as a closing statement, what would you say to those that are just suffering or in pain today around miscarriage? Like, what would your final thoughts, your final encouragement be to them?
I think for a long time I looked for almost like a survival guide, right? And I think the only way I kind of learnt to get through it was I really had to come back to a place of leaning on God. And I know that sounds really airy-fairy.
What did that look like? Give us a practical application of that.
Be real in this, because you couldn't read your Bible, could you?
No.
In that moment, it was too hard.
I think for me it looked like praying what I actually wanted to say, right? And all the pain and the grief wrapped up in that, and it wasn't coated, and I probably wouldn't have wanted people to hear it apart from God. Do you know what I mean? And I think it was not in a I'm not promised tomorrow, not that kind of sense, but it was a God, everything I have is yours, right? Because I can't control what happens. And actually it took the pressure off. It took the pressure off me thinking that it was my body that failed, or that I'd done something wrong, or, anything like that. It became this God's in control thing. And I think, I couldn't read my Bible for a while. So it was, I actually just kind of filled myself with, I watch YouTube videos of Christians and things like that, listen to podcasts. Spent a lot of time actually just kind of, praying differently. And I think that for me was probably what shifted things. So I guess for someone going through that, it's okay to grieve and to find everything that you've been taught about God tricky. And I think you don't have to put on a brave face in that, because God doesn't need you to. He just wants you to be honest with him and open, and it's through that he can kind of start that healing process, and it becomes a heart change rather than just that I'm supposed to be okay with this. Would you?
Yeah, like first thing, like you're not alone in this. If you're going through this or something else, it's a tricky situation. Like you're not alone, and there'll be people around. Sorry, take. It's been an hour. He's getting a bit, bit agitated.
I thought we should finish it for his sake as well as ours.
Yeah. You're not alone in that, and there are loads of great organisations, resources out there. It'd just be a Google search, but also prayer. Get prayer. What's the line for God TV? Prayer.
Yeah, we've got a prayer. We've got a prayer line at God TV that you can call. I'd remind everyone at home really that it's not a counselling service. It's just a place where, like, Christians who love God will stand in prayer for you. Intercede for you, and if you can't pray, even just ring up and say, hey, I can't pray, but I'd like someone to pray for this for me. And they can do it on the phone there. They can do it off the phone. It's a really cool stuff.
Great. And then you touched on it there. Like, I think for us, like, regardless of the spiritual aspect, which there is one, like there is a physical human thing that you're going through, and counselling is just such a great resource. Like, nobody is too far gone or not too far gone enough to need counselling or therapy or whatever that looks like for you. And for us, just even in dealing with the grief aspect of that, it would have taken a lot longer and been a lot more painful had we not gone and spoken through with a therapist who could help us process literally how we think, or together as a couple, like the differences in how we think. Like, why am I not crying? Why is Luce crying all the time? Like, how do we understand each other in that? And that's just not something we would have done had it not been for a counsellor that we could sit down and talk together. So, like, I'd encourage everyone out there I'd encourage everyone to get therapy anyway. Everyone needs therapy. But please do make use of that. And I think, just talk about it to the extent which you feel like you can talk about it. Like, don't feel like you can talk about these topics, because the only way that we're going to be able to, like, describe, explain, get through these things, get the church better at talking about these things, is if, like, we just start talking about them. Be that anything we've spoken about today, whether that's intimacy, relationships, miscarriage, marriage, struggles in marriage, all these kind of like huge topics which are like taboos in the church, sadly. Like, we just need to be talking about them more.
Right. Well, thank you both for coming and being so honest. Thank you, Levi, for being good mostly. And, to everyone at home, really, a big thank you to the production team. So today we have no other producers sat in front interviewing, but we also have Richard and Trevor in the back room doing what they do, and in the room with us today as well we have someone pointing the camera and doing some close-ups for us. We have Dimitri with us in the room. So just thank you to everyone in production, because without them it wouldn't be possible, and thank you to all of you at home who watch. We know that every podcast isn't for everybody, but do like, share and subscribe. It helps us to continue to grow awareness around how Christians deal with difficult issues. We're here for you, so go in the comments, call the prayer line. We're here for you, to pray with you, to stand with you, and just to love with you and help you find your way back to God if you're feeling a little bit lost. So from myself, Noah, Lucy and Levi, we say God bless you, thank you, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of Together, the podcast, here at God TV.